The Galactic Council chamber was alive with noise and chaos, a storm of voices clashing against one another as dozens of alien empires fought to make their point heard. Claws slammed against metal tables, tails struck the ground, wings flared wide, and the sound of anger echoed across the hall that stretched higher than any cathedral, a place built to hold the most powerful voices of the galaxy, yet that power now seemed trapped in endless argument, the debate turning in circles without end. One empire shouted for conquest, another for compromise, another for destruction, another for trade, all voices rising louder, yet none willing to listen, and so the noise grew and grew, drowning out reason, smothering sense, until it was little more than a battle of sound. But at the far end of the chamber, far away from the storm, sat the humans, still and quiet, their presence almost swallowed by the storm of noise, yet not forgotten. Because even as empires shouted, eyes often drifted to them, waiting, expecting, wondering when or if they would finally speak. Though the humans did not, they simply sat, hands folded on the table, faces calm, eyes steady, never reacting to the insults thrown at them, never rising to defend themselves, never even moving, and that stillness began to eat away at some of the louder voices, for though most laughed at them, calling them children, calling them weak, calling them irrelevant, a seed of unease began to take root in the minds of those who paid closer attention. A question whispered in silence: why do they not answer? For days the council debated without rest, their voices spilling from the chamber into every broadcast channel, the galaxy watching the endless quarrel unfold, billions of citizens seeing their leaders shout and scream yet reach no agreement, the stars held hostage by noise, for no one wanted to yield, every empire demanded its own terms, every empire wanted to claim dominance, and so nothing changed, nothing moved forward. The war drums beat in speeches but never in action, and all the while the humans remained silent, their delegation a strange island of stillness in the storm. The galaxy thought them too new to matter, too small to change the course of history. Humanity had only just stepped into the stars compared to species that had ruled for thousands of years, and so the laughter continued, sharp and cruel, voices mocking the quiet figures who did not defend themselves, who did not boast of fleets or threaten with armies. Voices saying humans were barely worth mentioning, that their place in the chamber was charity. Yet even as those words were thrown, not one human rose, not one replied, and that silence became heavier as time stretched on. Some began to notice it first, not the loudest empires, not the ones drunk on their own voices, but the smaller races who knew the weight of watching quietly. They whispered to each other across private channels, messages passing behind the storm of arguments, questions forming in shadows. Why are they so calm? Why do they not defend their honor? No species sits so still while being mocked, no people remain so quiet when they are dismissed. Maybe they have no reply, maybe they accept their weakness, but maybe they wait for something, and those whispers grew, slipping like cracks in stone through the greater noise, not loud enough to silence the chamber, but enough to spread, enough to plant the idea that silence was not weakness but patience. Meanwhile, the days dragged on, and the chamber sank deeper into noise, the same arguments repeated, the same insults shouted. Empires that had once sworn loyalty to each other now stood against one another. The debate was not about truth anymore, it was about power, about who could shout the loudest and crush the voices around them. And as this storm grew, the humans remained the only constant. They did not waver, they did not argue, they did not shift in their seats, as though they were carved from stone, waiting, always waiting, and that began to gnaw at even the proudest leaders, for every time they cast their eyes toward the humans, they saw no fear, no anger, no exhaustion, only silence, and in that silence was something they could not name, something they could not control, a calmness that unsettled them more than the loudest roar. By the end of the third day, cracks in the council began to show, alliances that had stood for centuries now frayed, voices turned against old friends, suspicions born of exhaustion, but the humans did not bend to any side, they gave no hint of their thoughts, and so rumors spread across the chamber floor, whispered between aides, muttered by diplomats, that maybe the humans were not weak at all, maybe they had come with a plan. Maybe their silence itself was the plan, and though no one dared to say it aloud, the thought clung to the air like a shadow, and the longer the silence lasted, the heavier it grew, until even the loudest voices found themselves pausing mid-sentence, glancing toward the quiet humans, as if afraid that when they finally did speak, the entire chamber would change forever. The second session of the council began with the same storm of voices, the same slamming of claws and pounding of fists, the same endless tide of words without end, but now something was different. Now a shadow hung over every voice, an unease that none wanted to admit, for though the chamber still roared, though insults still flew, though empires still tried to crush one another with sheer volume, all of it was now touched by the quiet weight of human silence. Their presence unbroken, their stillness unchanged, their refusal to join the madness becoming more powerful than any speech. and some could no longer laugh as they had before, for laughter was harder when one's voice trembled, when one's eyes kept drifting toward the end of the hall where humans sat today. The insults continued. Some shouted that humans were cowards, too afraid to take a side. Others mocked that they were lost, without wisdom or courage, but none of these words seemed to pierce the wall of stillness that surrounded the human table. No movement, no glance, no whisper came from them, and that very lack of reaction struck deeper than any defense could, because every empire there knew the value of appearances. They knew that silence was never truly silence, that behind it there was always something, strategy or threat or truth, and so the calm faces of the humans began to feel less like weakness and more like a blade waiting in the dark. On the fourth day of the council meeting, the arguments turned uglier. Old rivals threatened war openly, ships were ordered to borderlines, alliances that had lasted centuries cracked under the weight of mistrust. The chamber that had been meant to prevent bloodshed now seemed to summon it instead, and through it all, the humans still did not speak, but something else began to spread, a pattern only the sharpest observers caught. The way the human delegates' hands moved slightly now and then, tapping fingers in rhythm, exchanging the briefest nods, a quiet code passed between them, seen by few, understood by none, but enough to confirm the whispers that had already begun. The humans were not lost, they were not passive, they were waiting. In the cities beyond the council, the galaxy watched in growing confusion. News channels replayed the human silence again and again. Analysts debated endlessly about what it meant. Some argued it was proof of weakness, others insisted it was proof of strength. Citizens sent messages in billions, some laughing, some afraid, some demanding answers, but no answers came, only more silence, and so the mystery grew. The entire galaxy leaning closer to the screen as though silence itself had become louder than all the shouts of the council. By the fifth day, the tension could no longer be ignored. Even the strongest empires began to falter in their voices, no longer as sure of themselves, their eyes too often flicking toward the humans, waiting for the moment that never came. And for the first time in centuries, the council was united in one thing only: curiosity, a gnawing, growing need to know what the humans were holding back, what secret they carried behind their unbroken stillness. And though none said it aloud, all felt it in their bones, that when humans finally spoke, the stars themselves might shift. The third week of debate began with exhaustion, the alien leaders' voices hoarse, their patience burned away, yet still the chamber thundered with endless words, threats, and promises, the same storm without end, and still the humans sat in silence, calm as stone, unmoved by rage or mockery, and now their silence had grown heavier, pressing against every voice, bending the debate itself, so that every insult thrown at them seemed weak. Every demand for their opinion fell flat, because the humans did not answer, and the absence of reply had become more powerful than any declaration could have been. Whispers moved like fire through the chamber, leaders leaned toward their aides, claws scratching notes on glowing tablets, tails curling with unease, and the rumors spread faster than truth. Some said the humans had uncovered a secret weapon, others claimed they had allies hidden in the dark between stars, some even believed the silence itself was a tactic, a kind of warfare that twisted the minds of rivals, and though none could agree, all agreed on one thing. This was no accident. The humans were waiting for something, and the longer they waited, the more dangerous they seemed. On the seventh day of this new session, a fight nearly broke out between two empires, ships already clashing at a border world, reports flashing on screens, captains screaming for orders, but still the humans did not move, and it was that very stillness which froze the chamber, for though the others shouted, though they threatened fleets and sieges, it was clear now that no one dared act too far without first knowing what the humans would do. A reversal no one had expected, where those once mocked as weak now controlled the room by doing nothing at all. Beyond the chamber, across the galaxy, the silence of the humans had become the greatest story of the age. Millions tuned to watch them sit, to watch them exchange quiet glances, to watch them breathe, and debates filled taverns, marketplaces, and great halls. Some laughed nervously and said the humans were bluffing, others whispered in fear that the humans were waiting for the exact moment when the galaxy was most divided to strike. And every hour that passed without a word from Earth made the galaxy lean closer, their curiosity stretching into dread. The council chamber itself grew colder as the days dragged on, voices more strained, movements sharper, like predators trapped in a cage, and still the humans remained unmoved, their eyes steady, their hands folded, as though they had all the time in the universe, and for the first time in centuries, empires that had never feared each other now shared the same fear. The quiet shape at the end of the hall, the silence that spread like a shadow over the stars, and in that shadow, every empire felt smaller, as though they were the prey and not the hunters, waiting for the sound of the voice that had not yet spoken. The fourth session began under strange weight, the chamber crowded yet hushed, for though the aliens still shouted, still roared their arguments about war and treaties, none of it had the same power anymore, not with the humans sitting in silence, their calm now louder than any voice, and the galaxy could feel it, a tension building like a storm behind glass, pressing harder every hour, until even the fiercest empires grew restless, their threats sounding hollow in their own ears. By then, whispers had turned to open fear, whole delegations glancing over their shoulders, wondering if the humans had hidden fleets waiting beyond the stars, if perhaps their ancient enemies had already fallen under Earth's shadow, and though no proof was ever shown, it no longer mattered, because the silence itself was proof enough, a weapon sharper than any blade, and every time a human delegate shifted in their seat, every time one of them exchanged the smallest nod, the room froze, as if the next second might be the one where everything changed. At night, ambassadors reported sleepless councils within their empires, leaders demanding answers their spies could not provide, and the more they searched, the less they found, for the humans had hidden their movements well, no new shipyards, no massive fleet launches, nothing that explained the confidence with which they now held the galaxy in suspense, and this mystery fed the fear, growing it until even the strongest races admitted in private that perhaps silence itself had become humanity's greatest weapon. Inside the chamber, debates dragged on like broken records, voices cracking, tails lashing, fists pounding on tables, yet all of it came back to the same question, unspoken but felt. What will the humans say? And the longer no answer came, the more desperate the others grew, because every empire knew they had built their plans on the assumption that humans were weak, predictable, emotional, yet what they faced now was something else. Something unreadable, a predator hiding in tall grass, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. On the 10th night, when another round of screaming arguments collapsed without decision, one alien leader broke and shouted across the chamber, his voice cracking, demanding that the humans speak at last, that they declare their position, but the humans gave no reply, only quiet glances to each other, and the silence that followed was heavier than the roar that had filled the chamber seconds before, a silence that spread like gravity, bending every thought, every fear, until the galaxy itself leaned toward them, waiting for the words that had not yet come. On the 11th day the chamber no longer felt like a place of power but like a cage, filled with restless predators trapped together, claws tapping, wings twitching, fangs grinding in frustration, for every empire had spoken 1,000 words yet gained nothing, and still the humans sat untouched, their silence sharper than steel, their calm eyes watching every movement as if recording, as if judging. And in that calmness the other races felt something they could not name, something that twisted in their stomachs and made their scales prickle, as if they had all walked willingly into a trap. By then, rumors no longer whispered, they screamed through the council halls, stories of human fleets hidden behind dead stars, of weapons designed in silence, of colonies that had endured without allies and now stood stronger than anyone guessed, and each rumor, though wild, was fed by fear until even those who had mocked humans as weak began to doubt their laughter, began to wonder if the silence itself was proof that humanity held cards none could see. In private, alien rulers argued with their own ambassadors, demanding action, demanding certainty, but certainty could not be found, and the more they pressed, the more their delegates broke into panic, for how do you negotiate with a species that says nothing, that reveals nothing, that turns every shouted threat into a reflection of your own fear, until the loudest voices began to sound like children screaming in the dark, and the humans remained still, unshaken, like hunters waiting for prey, to exhaust itself. That evening, the chamber collapsed into chaos, voices overlapping, chairs thrown, claws drawn, and for the first time weapons were half unsheathed on the council floor, the fragile piece splintering before it could even be decided, and yet through it all the humans did not move, their calm presence pressing heavier than warships, their silence louder than explosions, and it was in that moment that the galaxy understood something terrifying. That silence itself was not weakness but power, a decision, a blade held at the throat of every empire, waiting for one word to cut. And when the hall finally quieted, when every alien sat panting, trembling, their threats drained to whispers, the humans remained exactly as they had been from the first day, silent, watchful, unbroken, and the galaxy knew the end was near, for no empire could outlast silence forever, and when humanity finally chose to speak, nothing across the stars would remain the same. On the 12th day the chamber was no longer a place of argument but of fear, for no one dared raise their voice now, no one dared slam a claw or spread a wing, all eyes fixed on the human table where 4 figures sat still as stone, their silence weighing heavier than fleets of warships, and at last the council elder, old and trembling, begged them to speak, his voice breaking as he asked what humanity wanted. For a long moment nothing happened, and then slowly one human rose, not hurried, not nervous, but calm as if the last 12 days had been nothing more than waiting for this exact second, and when he looked across the chamber every alien felt his gaze as if it pierced bone and memory, as if it reached into every hidden fear they carried. He did not shout, he did not rage, he did not even raise his voice, he simply spoke a single sentence, his words cutting sharper than any weapon. Peace will be kept, or humanity will end this debate forever. The chamber froze, every empire holding its breath, because in those simple words they heard not a threat but a promise, not a boast but a certainty, and for the first time the galaxy saw what silence truly meant, that humans had already decided their place among the stars, and nothing would move them from it. No one answered, no one dared, for the discussion had ended not with treaties, not with agreements, but with the quiet strength of a species that had no need to prove itself, and from that day onward whenever councils met, whenever empires argued, a single memory returned. The day silence fell across the stars, because the humans ended the discussion.